Hey everyone, this is Dean Rogers, and welcome to the first edition of 2025 Snapshots. It's the Rogers Review segment in which we talk to the people who shape the entertainment world. Now, already off to a bad start, ladies and gentlemen. On
Oh
this
yeah,
edition
I
of
got you.
Snapshot, on this edition of Snapshots, it's not every day you would have a conversation with someone who made such an impact on your life that you pursue a dream because of them. As a young boy growing up in the DMV, I loved watching the local news. The NBC affiliate WRC TV Channel 4 had the ultimate dream team back in the 80s and the 90s, which includes our current guests. He reported on film, theater, and entertainment in DC and has since the 1970s. The Washington Post calls him a local legend, and it is so true in my heart. His career included 32 years on WRC TV Channel 4, as well as 8 years on WJLA, ABC 7, and News Channel 8. Why didn't he work on 9? We'll never know. Or 5, too.
Oh, 5 wouldn't have me.
I see. Okay.
Tony Perkins tried for me. I'll give him that. Yeah, oh yeah, he's a good guy.
He is a good guy, absolutely. His movie and entertainment reports continue as co-host of At the Movies with Ann and Arch and Ann, a weekly podcast with the Washington Post lead film critic Ann Hornaday. Now he recalls the happy talk days of the local TV news when stations discovered the value of assembling a news team in his new book, The Accidental Critic. And for our fellow Washingtonians, you can see him give a talk about his book at the DC, there it is, The Accidental Film Critic.
Yeah, it's the right way when you buy it.
Yes, indeed. And for our fellow Washingtonians, you can see him give a talk at the DC's premier independent bookstore, Politics and Prose, this Sunday, February 2nd. Yes, Groundhog Day, at the Connecticut Avenue location at 5 p.m., which he is joined by NBC News 4 alumni Doreen Gentzler. My friends, it is the greatest honor that I have with me, the legendary, the amazing Arch Campbell. Arch, welcome to Snapshots.
Dean, thank you so much for having me. It's always been such a pleasure to run into you. You've always got a smile, a good word, and this is very kind of you. I'm an old guy now. I've been retired. And for the past few years, I've been writing a memoir. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sort of an oral history of television news from the 70s until the internet age.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, as I mentioned to a couple of my friends, that this was a book I could not afford to put down because it did delve into such history of Washington before I was born when it came to the television. In fact, I was reading one of the chapters and seeing some of the names that are no longer in the industry and no longer in the DC metropolitan news. That it's like, I remember Davey, I remember Maureen, I remember Gordon, I remember Max, I remember Jim. It felt like a time machine and a history lesson for anybody who's not only from and grew up in Washington, but who watched these legendary reporters, anchormen, who filled our news waves over the last few decades or so.
Well, I call my book The Accidental Critic because it starts in 1973 when I was working in a newsroom in Dallas, and our new boss stormed into the office, into the newsroom, and says, "I want a movie reviewer. Who wants to do it?" The place went silent. So I raised my hand. I said, "I'll do it." And a new movie had opened that weekend, American Graffiti. That was the first movie I ever reviewed on television. 1973, more than 50 years ago. And that is how I got to be a movie reviewer. I was working in television news. I was the feature guy. I did the funny stories at the end of the news. I got this gig reviewing movies, and that's what got me to Washington, the feature stories. And then after a time of struggle in the 70s, movies became very prominent here, partly because of the premiere night of Star Trek, the first film. They had the premiere here in order to tie in with the Smithsonian. And I went out and covered it. And the people I worked for at Channel 4 said, well, you used to review movies down there in Texas, right? I said, yeah, I did. They said, well, why don't you start doing it again? And here we are all these years later.
That is amazing, especially since you mentioned Star Trek, because as you see right here, there's a Star Trek Voyager picture. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I cannot believe when I read about that premiere in Washington, D.C. at the MacArthur Theater, which is no longer here.
Right. And it was so early in the premiere days that nobody set up a press line or anything. We were just all standing around there with our cameras. Somebody would show up. We would rush them. There was this big scrim of people around like Leonard Nimoy and the other stars. And later, things changed. The thing I miss most of all is the days of the Uptown Theater, which held so many premieres. There'd be one every month. Really? And celebrities and stars. And now to drive by and see the Uptown empty is something that makes me sad. But it also reminds me of how much great stuff happened there. The Uptown hosted Kevin Costner with his first print of Dances with Wolves. And the people who were in charge of the premiere got a hold of the projectionist. And, you know, these were the days when film was projected with this extremely hot bulb onto a screen hundreds of feet away. Everything's digital now. They said, you got to put a new projection bulb in there. And the guy said, no, if you do that, it might blow out because they take some time to get, to track in. They said, no, we want a new bulb. So they put the new bulb in. The premiere starts. They introduce Dances with Wolves. And sure enough, the bulb blew out on about the third reel. And the middle of the premiere stops. Costner and all the executives run upstairs. And this poor guy is trying to change a hot projection bulb. He gets the new bulb in. They start back up again. He's put the wrong reel on. And I have a chapter called The Worst Premiere of the Best Movie.
Yes.
Because it went on to win the Oscar. But the premiere night was a disaster. So I wanted to put together a collection of stories about those days, starting with the era where we would try anything, where the boss would come in and say, who wants to be the movie reviewer?
Yep.
And now things are very different, especially in television news. And that's because of streaming and the internet and COVID and the passage of time. I'm not saying that we were better back then. I'm just saying that times were different. And I am also giving you a little backstage peek at some of the things that went on. The heart of my book is the friendship between me, Jim Vance, Doreen Gentzler, Bob Ryan, and George Michael. Yes. And not only, a lot of people retire from television, having worked there, been the anchor 20 years or something. We were put together as a team and stayed as a team almost 30 years. And that was the unusual secret sauce of Channel 4, the thing that made us unique over probably most of the other TV stations in America.
You're absolutely right. And wow, you're giving me a lot of treasure trove that there were so many things I really wanted to talk to you about. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is I read that a teacher back in your, I believe it was high school days, inspired you to pursue a career in radio and television. And like you, I had a teacher, and her name was Mrs. Oh man, I forgot her name. My gosh. Oh my gosh. I cannot believe I just left off the name. She was my high school teacher, and when I saw there was a TV studio in our high school, that inspired me to become a journalist. I want you to talk about your teacher that inspired you.
I had two teachers in high school. One was a speech teacher who encouraged me and taught me how to get up and give a speech. And she's the one at the end of the year who said, you have the gift of gab, which is not a phrase used much these days. But she says, you ought to go into radio. The other teacher was the drama teacher. And a friend and I decided to try out for the talent show. And we did a little two-man, back and forth comedy act. And she calls us out into the audience and gets up and says, boys, you stink. You're not going to be in my talent show. But then she turns to me and she says, I want you to MC my talent show. And suddenly both teachers got together. They changed my schedule for me. I started meeting with this teacher and a group of kids every morning, and we would write the script. And it was like being on a show in L.A. I mean, it was like the writers' room, and I was 17 years old experiencing this, and it sent me on the path I wanted to go. And that teacher. The one teacher told me to go into radio. The other teacher, the dramatic teacher, moved to a community college to teach radio and television. Wow. So I thought, I'm going with her. Incidentally, I'm a fan of community colleges for that. For that reason. I went to San Antonio Junior College for 2 years. And then I went on to the University of Texas and got a degree, and then I stayed for another degree. But the community college is the thing that really gave me the base I needed. So those two teachers are the reason for it all. And I stayed in touch with them for the rest of their lives.
Nice. Well, I'm so glad to hear. And I just remember my teacher name. It was Mrs. Acree. That was my help.
She's watching. Be sure and edit this.
She'll never forgive me. No. Now, as I mentioned earlier before, one of the things that I loved about your book is the detailed history it presents, especially about DC, the news teams back when it started. And when I read the names, it clicked that these were the people that I learned about the world. Now, you had the transition of going from WFAA, Channel 8 ABC affiliate, to Washington, WRC TV. What was your initial impressions of going from a top 10 market to one of the bigger top 10 markets in the country?
I didn't particularly want to go, but my wife really wanted to go. I could have stayed in Texas the rest of my life because that's where I grew up. And the station where I worked was beginning to find itself and getting on a roll. And when I came up to Washington, it didn't compare. It wasn't as loose and as easy as the place I had come from. Gradually, Channel 4 struggled all during the 70s. They went through a lot of people. They made a lot of the wrong decisions. what was so encouraging and satisfying was after 6 years of struggle, suddenly a great general manager came in and began to say, we can compete, we can win the television news race if we compete as a team.
Yes.
And the idea of a team took hold. And so he's the one who found George Michael and found Bob Ryan. And he put George Michael and Bob Ryan and Jim Vance on the 11 o'clock news and the 6 o'clock. He called me in. He said, I want you on the end of the news every night, 6 and 11. I said, gee, well, how am I going to do that? And the guy I worked for said, review movies, go to theater, do your feature stories. I had done like funny stories. There are a lot of stories in there about some of the things I did. At one point, I trained a miniature pig as a pet because it had been invented for scientists, and then they decided they didn't want to deal with it. My boss told me to get one, and that was a long running series. Spot the Pig, my pet pig. But when he put us together, we stayed together. And once we got together, we all supported each other. I think the thing that made Channel 4 unique was doing news, weather, and sports, and then also including entertainment every night. And then after my segment, Johnny Carson would come on. So you had news, and then the weather, and then the sports, and then me, and then Johnny Carson. Those were the days when people would turn on their TV and not change the channel. And we were a great lead-in to those days. Now that doesn't go on so much because of streaming. Mm-hmm. But that was our world back then.
And it was such a great world. In fact, staying with the team topic, I remember back in the day when I was a very young
I know where you're going.
Channel 4 had the amazing We're the Team campaign. And it was such
those commercials show up on YouTube now, and people are looking at them again. We would go out, we did these commercials, We're the Team.
Yes.
And doing the commercials is one of the things that made us a team. We would play, there was one where we were playing football.
Yep.
There was one where we were in the kitchen cooking crabs or something. I don't know. The pinnacle was they put us all out on a sailboat in the Chesapeake Bay, and we all stayed overnight with our spouses. Mm-hmm. Much went on behind the scenes. There was quite a bit of carousing, maybe a little drinking, maybe a couple of people, I won't name names, got into a fist fight. We still talk about that. The other people at the other stations said, they're selling you guys like a can of beer. And of course they were. But the point is, it worked.
It did.
We became a team. And there's nothing, television stations back then were full of people with gigantic egos. And we were able to get past our ego and support each other. And I think that's what you saw every night. You saw support. I would get on the very end, and then I'd say something. Over here, you'd hear, ha, 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 which is just the best sound in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the team idea is what made us what we were.
Absolutely. And when you hear the laugh from Jim Vance,
right,
you know you're having a good time.
Yeah.
And when it comes to NBC4, among the great talent we have seen over the years, the glue that held it together was Jim Vance. And if there was
Yeah.
someone I wanted to be growing up, it was him. In fact, I actually got a chance to meet with him at a charitable event so many years before he passed away. In fact, you shared with the Washington magazine at the time of his death that he took the measure of the people he worked
Oh,
with
yeah.
and took the time deciding if he respected you or not. It took a while, but once Vince accepted you, he was your friend for life. Tell us a story about you and Jim, and what was it like to work with him for so many years at NBC?
Well, this one I didn't put in the book, and I wish I had. I was out on the set one night,
Yeah.
and the commercials would come on, and we'd talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And so Vance says, "What are you going to do this weekend?" I said, "Well, my wife is going to bake an apple pie, and we're going to eat it." And he says, "When?" I said, "Well, Saturday night about 7." He says, "Okay, I'll be over." So I go home. I tell my wife, "I think Vance is coming over." It snowed that night. It started snowing, and 7 o'clock comes. The apple pie, is baking in the oven. Here comes a big, gigantic truck. Vance had one of those four-door Ford or Chevy trucks that you see now. He pulls into the driveway. His wife could barely get out of it because the thing was so high up. Kathy McCampbell, very small, petite young woman. I opened the door. I said, "Come on in. The pie is baking." He sits down. Gina brings the pie out. We cut it into 4 quarters, dig it out. We sat there. We ate apple pie. He says, "Okay, I'll see you later." He gets up and leaves. And I love that. He felt comfortable enough, and I felt comfortable enough. And that was Vance.
You're absolutely right.
And I think I tell a bunch of funny stories, a bunch of behind the scenes stories. But the first night we got on we went from typewriters to typing our scripts in the computer. The computer would go right to the teleprompter. It was a big change. The first night that happened, I wrote my lead in. Bob Ryan knew technology better than the rest of us. He got in there. And I think my lead in said something like, "A new movie opened tonight and Arch Campbell watched. Let's see what he thinks." And Bob added the phrase, "And he's not wearing any pants." And Doreen is reading this, and she gets to that. She goes, "Oh." The whole place is laughing. The point I want to make is, though, the through line. I think the untold point of my book is that our kind of television started in the early 70s when college people like me went into newsrooms. And then it, I think, concluded with the death of Jim Vance in 2017.
Yeah.
So that's 47 years. And now news is different. It's internet-based, it's story-based. It's different. But I think Jim Vance, after having been the anchorman for 48 years on one station, his passing closed a chapter. I'm not saying things were better. I'm saying they were different. But I don't think you will see an anchor team together that many years. And I don't think you will see an anchor man with that sort of heft as Vance had in the future.
I couldn't agree more, especially with the newer current journalists and reporters to move from station to station or market to market or market to national, but to have the longevity that Jim Vance and the rest of the team did back in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. You're right. I doubt that in the 21st century, right now, we're going to have that again. I agree with you 100%.
Well, and what happened is the internet,
Mhm.
and the internet began to affect advertising, and the kind of dollars that stations were attracting began to shrink. And so in the middle of the 2000s, that's when stations began to spin people off.
Yeah.
And that's when our 2007 is about when our group were shown the door. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Mhm.
TV breaks your heart because you know it's going to end, and you worry about how it's going to end, and it ends. It's a little death per se, but it sure was fun while it lasted.
You're absolutely right. And for what I understand in the book, you actually went to a grand reopening at Nebraska, the station there. What was it like to step back into the newsroom, the building that helped your career in DC these years later, and see the changes that has occurred since you left?
When you write, somebody asked me how this book came together, and I would just write these stories up to save.
Yeah.
And suddenly I realized I had my ending. 10 years after I left, they called me and Bob Ryan back to record some stuff for an event celebrating Doreen Gentzler. And to go back in to the place that I worked, that was healing, and it tied things up. Then, so that was my ending, going back.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jim Vance died. So that was this chapter after the ending of my going back. And Vance had a public service at the National Cathedral.
Yeah.
Motorcycles were lined up in front of the National Cathedral because he was a bike rider. People after the service just stood out front and visited. And then they remodeled the entire building. They had a grand opening.
Yeah.
And so I went back again. And the place I remembered is now gone. It's only in my memory. It's completely different in there. There are a few things the same, but not much. And so that was the final bow on the loose ends. It's different. It's gone. It's not what I remember. And this is for the next generation. So how it was going back and going to Vance's funeral, and then going to the remodeled place, it was healing.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. And I actually went to Vance's funeral at the National Cathedral.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest,
I think I saw you there. I think we ran into each other in a big crowd out front.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it was beyond words for me, because as a journalist growing up and someone who had speech impairment also growing up, my speech pathologist at the time, Dr. Morris, God rest her soul, told me to watch the news. And to be at that event, even though it was saying goodbye to a great colleague of ours, but to thank so many reporters and anchors that I watched over the years and tell them thank you for help shaping my life. Because if it wasn't for watching the news, if it wasn't for listening to Jim Vance and you and Doreen and all the others from all different stations, about diction, about perfecting the speech, about listening and getting the new story, it would never have shaped my life today. So it was very cathartic to thank all of those wonderful people who have shaped my life. And you are part of it.
Well, you're welcome.
Absolutely. Well, I have a few more questions for you, my good friend. And don't forget, folks, join us at therogersreview.com in case you want to continue with the rest of the story, because this is going to be a little bit of a long one, but we love the long stories here.
Oh, and don't forget the Accidental Critic.
Yes.
Although it'll be the right way when you get it. And you can get it at politicsandprose.com. And I'm going to appear there February 2nd at 5 o'clock with Doreen Gentzler. She's going to interview me like you are. Yeah, this is my rehearsal.
Ooh, I love being in a rehearsal. That is good.
You're really helping me. Thank you.
Anytime. Well, as you both know, we have been film critics in the wonderful city of Washington, D.C. for so many years, and we have seen our fair share of films shot or set in the nation's capital. Do you have a favorite DC-centric film that you enjoy?
Yes, it is Being There from 1980 with Peter Sellers. He's kind of a savant. He's raised as a foundling, and his benefactor dies, and he's thrown out into the world. And he is a gardener. He loves to garden. He's kind of a simpleton. And he meets these powerful people, and his discussions of gardening are taken as great wisdom, political wisdom in the country. And it's a very satirical look at politics in America in 1980. I think it's the last movie Peter Sellers made.
I believe it is, yeah.
My favorite mistake is Kevin Costner in No Way Out, where he's being chased and he jumps into the metro in Georgetown. And then it's one of the worst at one of those drives where they're going from 19th Street to 16th Street, and they go by way of the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson, and then they cross the 14th Street Bridge to go 3 blocks so they can get all of the iconic buildings into the movie. What's yours?
Well, one of the latest things I've seen DC-centric is Minority Report. That's one of my favorites. Because every time I go by the Ronald Reagan International Trade Building and I see that little circle where the metro is like, oh yeah, that's where the hover ship goes.
Yeah.
But one of the things that keys into my memory about the film is the balcony scene. And I remember that distinctly so well because so many years ago, my late father actually worked at the hotel that the balcony was. And then to remind myself when I looked from the balcony to where the ship is going to be, it's like, wait a minute, that should not take a long time to get here. It'd be like, whoop, whoop. Like,
yes. Yeah.
So that was my movie mistake with that DC-centric film.
I'm afraid most movies set in DC are just full of mistakes, and it really it's hard to live in Washington and watch a movie set in Washington.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to get something right. Hopefully a few things, you know?
But take a look at Being There sometime, 1980.
Yes. Thank you. I'll put that on my list. Now, as a film critic, what is it that you look for when it comes to reviewing a film to tell us whether it's worth the money going to a theater or we should wait until it comes out on streaming?
Well, I think, a good rule of thumb is how many times do you look at your watch? If you really get involved into it, then you know it's done what it's trying to do. When I started out, I decided my touch tones would be: is it worth the price of admission? Does it do what it promises you? And is it entertaining? You know, you see advertising for a movie and you say, oh, well, I want to see that because it promises me whatever. And did it fulfill that promise or not? And then there's just plain entertainment value. So I went to see A Complete Unknown the other day, the Dylan movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, Dylan, everybody likes Dylan. He's okay. And I was blown away by how much I enjoyed it. I don't think I ever looked at my watch. Mm-hmm. And I got a bonus. It was really about the friendship between Dylan and Pete Seeger, and how Dylan outgrew Pete Seeger, and kind of broke his heart. And we all outgrow our mentors, and I just thought that was a bonus. Even The Brutalist, which is 3 hours and 30 minutes long. These days I don't go to screenings very much, because a lot of them are at 7:00 at Tyson's Corner. I would have to leave now to get to Tyson's Corner by 7:00. They're not in convenient locations. So I've gone back to going to the movies. And I went to see The Brutalist at the AFI in Silver Spring. I love that theater. Mm-hmm. And, I thought it was pretty good. I didn't look at my watch maybe one time, but I got an intermission so I could go out and pee. So, there's a guy who's invented an app called Run Pee.
No.
You put it on your phone and you start it, and it tells you where there are scenes that aren't important in a movie.
Wow.
And I interviewed him. I said, but you don't want people looking at their phone in the theater. He says, well, the screen is dark, so it doesn't emit much light, but it can tell you when you can.
Who would have known all these years that we have an app like that, and it now exists?
Run P. Check it out. You may need it. I know I do.
Oh yeah, especially with these 3-hour epics.
Right. So, but that's it. Is it entertaining? Does it do what it promised? And is it worth the price of admission? I worry about films because if you go to a regular screening now, you have to sit through up to 30 minutes of coming attractions. And then you have to hear Nicole Kidman talk about how glamorous the theater is. Right. Meantime, my feet are sticking to the floor. Mm-hmm. And I think they need to do something about that. I think if a movie's supposed to start at 10, it ought to start at like 10:05, 10:07.
That is true.
Theaters used to hold the curtain 7 minutes. To give that was for latecomers, and I think if it's 10 o'clock start, the film should begin at 10:07. But no one has asked me.
No, I wish they do. But yeah, it's too many trailers from nowadays. I mean, we got the internet and social media. We can just and go through the trailers right then. We don't need to see them at the movies. But you are still thriving in the world of entertainment, especially with a few podcasts at the movies with Ann Hornaday from the.
Well, now I did a podcast with Ann Hornaday for a couple of years, and now Ann has taken off to write a book. So now I'm doing the Arch Campbell podcast,
Nice.
And I have a variety of critics who come on. One is Jen Chaney. I try for Travis Hobson and sometime Tim Gordon to come on. Maybe I'll ask you on.
Oh, please. I would love to come on.
One of my go-to guys is the son of Davy Marlon Jones. Oliver
Wow.
Jones is a friend of mine. He lives in LA, and he's in the LA milieu. And I love talking to him about what he's watching at the movies, and he and I are friends, and so it sort of recreates the Arch Campbell, Davy Marlon Jones days. Yeah. I guess we should explain Davy Marlon Jones was on Channel 9 for almost 20 years, and was a very unusual theatrical guy with long hair and a hat. He would do magic tricks on the air, and he had a bit where he'd get a ticket and name the title of the movie, and then if he didn't like it, he'd throw it over his shoulder. It was fabulous. I tried to do that when I went to Channel 7. I did a test for a producer. He just looked at me and said, "We can't do that here."
Well, at least you tried.
Yeah.
Now, you and Gina have been married for now 30 years, which congratulations. What is the secret to the long-lasting marriage that you two share?
And it's my second marriage and her second marriage.
Okay.
So part of the secret is not making the mistakes you made the first time.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
And the other secret is whenever there's an opportunity to help the other one. And she started it. She was helpful to me from the word go. And then I was so grateful whenever she needed something, I immediately did what I could to help. So that kind of mutual support has kept us together all these years.
That's wonderful. And I wish you many more years of success with Gina.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Now that we're getting ready to go into your event on Sunday with your colleague, Doreen Gentzler of NBC4, what can our Washingtonians look forward to?
I think it's going to be very funny and fun. I think Bob Ryan is going to come as well.
Ooh,
I'm going to read a little short chapter called "Please Return the Towels," that involves a trick played on me. And then Doreen's going to introduce me. And then I'm going to sign books. If you will fork over $25 to buy this thing,
yes,
I'll sign it for you and I'll be there. And it should be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I'm interested in what Doreen is going to come up with to ask me about.
Yes. That is a good question, especially since she has more history than me. More history and lots more stories. Definitely, I know.
Right.
Now, for anyone who wants to be an entertainment reporter, film critic, theater reviewer, so forth, what advice would you give them?
Oh, my. Oh, my. I would say, well, I mean, I've got to couch my advice with, I don't know how well qualified I am to give advice now because the world has changed so much.
Right.
It used to be, I would say, there's always room for talented people, particularly in television news. Well, now there isn't. Mm-hmm. I would say that if you really love theater and entertainment, you can find a way to do it. That is the positive thing about the internet age we're in. You can find a way. I like this guy, Ty Burr, who reviews in the Post. And he's got a watch list, and he sells, you can subscribe to it. And I would say if you want to be an entertainment guru, figure out a way to do it. Pull into your entrepreneurial side and find a way to make yourself unique and go for it. The cliche is follow your dream, but it's pretty good advice.
And this has been pretty good advice from me as a person who's been doing it for many years to the next generation of film critics who will take our place down the road, many years down.
Right.
Well, Arch, we have ended our interview portion. Now we're going to go to our portion called Fast Facts, which I'll just ask a few questions and you just take about the first thing that comes to your mind. It's one of our newest segments in our Snapshots that we started in our 15th year. So you get to be the first for our 16th year to do this.
Oh, great.
Don't worry, it'll be easy questions, so don't worry about it.
Okay, all right.
All right. So what is your favorite holiday?
4th of July.
Why 4th of July?
Because it's warm and you can go swimming or you can just chill and enjoy the day.
Nice. What was your favorite red carpet moment?
My favorite red carpet moment was, I think I was standing in the museum and Savannah Guthrie walked by. And I had known her when she worked at Channel 4 years earlier. And she walks by, she's wrestling, and I say, Savannah! And she turns around, recognizes me, comes over, and gives me a big kiss.
Aww.
Now, I interviewed a lot of people on red carpets. I mean, if you name a celebrity, the chances are I met them. They're usually like me, they're plugging something. I do remember a red carpet for a movie starring Robin Williams. And I think it was the night that Clinton tried to bomb Osama bin Laden. So suddenly there was a national event going on. All the other cameras left. So we're at the Uptown Theater. For some reason, Channel 4 didn't pull my camera. So I was the only camera when Robin Williams showed up. He did like 30 minutes. All I could do was just laugh. But the one that really comes to mind is Savannah Guthrie because she is as nice as you think she is.
Excellent. What is your favorite place to travel? If you have to pick one.
One place to travel. I love to go back to my hometown of San Antonio.
Nice. So since I've been to San Antonio one time, for my next trip, what would you recommend I do the next time I'm in San Antonio?
I can give you the name of some Mexican restaurants that are the real thing, that will knock your socks off, and a few other things too.
Nice. What is your Netflix and chill TV show right now?
Monk. I'm rewatching Monk. Monk, anticipated all the stuff that happened after COVID. And I find them generally sweet and quite funny. So Monk. I've gone through several of those. I watched The Wire. I watched every episode of The Wire in order. I watched all the episodes of Seinfeld in order. I used to watch The Closer. Remember The Closer? But right now it's Monk.
Nice.
And sitting at night to watch 2 or 3 Monks without commercials, I sleep like a baby.
That's good. If any actor could portray you in a film or TV series,
Oh my. Because, well, it's changed so much. When I was young, I would say William Hurt,
oh wow,
in broadcast news. He's in that. Then later, my friends, we always wanted Samuel Jackson to play Vance,
oh
and Mariska Hargitay to play Doreen.
I can see that. I can truly see that. Yes.
We never got as far, and we would play this game. And when it came to me, they would say Wilford Brumley. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe Ryan Reynolds. I don't know. Somebody, some milquetoast guy. I can't. I'm working on that.
Okay.
But I don't think I'm going to go with Wilford Brumley.
Cool. I think right now, if someone were to portray me, it would probably be Michael B. Jordan. Right.
Oh
now.
Yeah.
He's got that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And finally, what is your favorite type of music?
Classical.
Are we talking classical as in Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven, or classical rock, or
Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Satie? I listen to WETA FM every morning. Wow. In fact, Linda Carducci, who's the morning host, gets me up every morning. The radio comes on, and there she is playing whatever she played. Today she played Beethoven's Ninth. So classical.
Wonderful. Mine is classic rock from the 60s all the way to the 1980s.
Yeah. Well, I like that too. I like classic R&B especially.
Yes. Do you have a favorite artist?
Well, let's see. Al Green, I think.
Nice. Yeah, mine will be Luther Vandross and Marvin Gaye.
Right.
Absolutely. Wow. I wish we can go on forever, but Arch, once again, it has been an honor to talk with you in the new year. And I know we're going to see each other at a film screening or red carpet down the road. And what else can I say? Thank you.
You've been very kind to me. You're very nice to do this. I really appreciate it. And I've always enjoyed running into you. And thank you for your friendship, Dean.
Thank you too, Arch. If there's anyone who has been a great mentor to me and a path that I always wanted to follow throughout this journey, it was definitely yours. Thank you for being part of my life.
Well, tell your friends to buy my book.
I'm going to right now. My friends, The Accidental Critic, a television news memoir, will be available at Politics and Prose. Get it, politicsandprose.com. And do not forget, if you're not doing anything this Sunday, Groundhog Day, February 2nd, 5 p.m., go to Politics and Prose on Connecticut Avenue, where you get to see Arch, you get to see Doreen Gentzler, maybe Bob Ryan, who knows?
Maybe Bob.
Be there. And don't forget, this event is free for first come, first serve seating. So get in early, please, because we know Washingtonians, when it comes to book talks, we get there early. So get there. This is Dean Rogers for the Rogers View. And if you like this snapshot, the first one of 2025, and you want to see more, which we know this new year is going to bring us so much more, click over to the RogersRevue.com. Revue spelled R-E-V-U-E. Like us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and we're now on Blue Sky too. So until we meet again, my friends, for the legendary Arch Campbell, this is Dean Rogers. And until we meet again, my friends, as I always say, see you out there.